And a very good evening to you, and welcome to Politics 101 on a Tuesday evening. I'm David Hines. As promised, um, we are going to be speaking with a leader of the opposition and a leader of the People's National Congress, Mr. Aubrey Norton, this evening. As you remember, that interview was scheduled for last Thursday, but due to some unforeseen circumstances, we were not able to bring you that interview. But today, we are going to have Mr. Norton on. Um, uh, of course, as you know, political leaders are quite busy, and sometimes it's very difficult to nail them down. But Mr. Norton is here this evening. He's in the studio. He's traveling, so it would be a traveling interview, so to speak. Welcome to Politics 101. Want to urge all of you who are joining us to please share the link. Let all your friends and acquaintances know that we are going to have that interview on this evening. Trust that you all had quite a productive weekend. It was a holiday weekend in Guyana because Sunday was Labor Day, and of course, when the holiday falls on a Sunday, it's it's observed the following day, Monday. So it was a long weekend for those of you in Guyana. It was Workers' Day, Labor Day in other parts of the world. Not in all jurisdictions was there a holiday. Nevertheless, it was May Day, Workers' Day, and we saw in Guyana the trade unions doing their usual Labor Day observances, marching and making their speeches, making their demands on behalf of labor. Last week we had a discussion here in Politics 101 on the relevance of the trade union movement, the role of the trade unions in the changing political landscape in Guyana. We are partly living under an authoritarian government. We're also living under a new regime, and that is the oil and gas regime. And that brings with it tremendous changes and calls into question what's the role of the trade union. Like all living organisms, the trade union itself must undergo some changes. It must react, if you will, to the changing situation. We're going to try to get Aubrey Norton to see if he has some ideas on the role of trade unions. In all political parties, as we learned last week, all came out of trade unions. And in some regards, the political party has replaced the trade union because political parties no longer engage in collective bargaining, certainly not in Guyana. And when one is talking about race and wages and salaries, one usually looks to the government, not the political party, and that says something about collective bargaining. So welcome everyone, the news across the region. We know that those of you who's been following the Caribbean news would know that the premier of the British Virgin Islands was arrested last week in the United States of America in a sting operation. He's been accused of drug running and a conspiracy with narcotic trafficking and so on. And there is a proposal that the British should take direct control of the British Virgin Islands again, a kind of crown colony rule. And there are some voices across the region that are championing that cause. But I think the vast majority of people are asking the question as I'm asking: how does the accusation and arrest of the head of government for corruption, how does that then translate into the British taking direct control again of the British Virgin Islands? The islands are still a colony, but they had some form of self-government. They have. And the British is threatening to take back that self-government. We in Guyana, in 1953, when we elected our first government under that self-government scheme, or self-government system, the British moved in after 133 days and resorted Guyana to crown colony rule. Our constitution was not restored, and we did not get another election for 4 years. The government, the country was ruled by an interim government. So we have had our taste of that. Now, does Britain have corruption in high places? Yes. Is anybody threatening, is the crown threatening to take away the powers of the Prime Minister in Britain and have direct rule by the monarchy? I doubt it. I doubt it. But yes, that's what's happening out there in the Caribbean. And those of you in the United States would have awakened today to the news of a leak draft of a ruling by the Supreme Court that in effect threatens to take away Roe versus Wade, the right to abortion in the United States of America. That has been a right that has been there since 1973 with the ruling by the Supreme Court. Now 49 years later, almost 50 years later, with a 6-3 majority on the court, the right wing, the Republicans, are now threatening, to overrule that ruling of the court from 49 years ago. Remember, under Roe versus Wade, the court said a woman has the right. A woman has the right to an abortion, and they cited the Constitution. They cited the right to privacy. A woman has a right to privacy, and it's under the right to privacy enshrined in the Bill of Rights that a woman enjoys the right to an abortion. Now, the Supreme Court, based on this leak draft, the Supreme Court seems on course to taking away that right from women. Big news in the United States of America. You know, the country that likes to lecture the world about democracy. The country that likes to lecture the world about democracy is taking away the right, fundamental right of women to decide on their own bodies. Welcome to Politics 101. Welcome to Politics 101. Aubrey Norton is here, and we are going to begin that interview in a second. Please spread the link, and we are going to begin the interview in a minute or so. In a minute or so, once we are satisfied that everyone is on board and Politics 101 is about to take off. You know, the president had a breakfast on Labor Day, you know, inviting trade unions. And you heard some of the trade unions abusing and cussing the government on trade union on Labor Day. And the vast majority of them were at the man's breakfast. They couldn't march together on the streets, the FITOG unions and the TUC, but most of them, not all of them, most of them were at this breakfast by the president. The way this divide and rule and the way in which trade unions allow government to dictate to them, to emasculate them, it's really nauseating. An institution that was really at the heart of the anti-colonial movement, striking the last blow beginning in the 1930s for decolonization. The way trade unionists allow themselves to be kicked around by government, and then they go out there and cuss the government. You look at the list, the CCW, the PSU, they were all there. I don't even think the PSU marched on Labor Day, you know, but they were at the president. We are in really bad shape. Welcome to Politics 101. And as promised, our interview tonight is with Mr. Aubrey Norton, leader of the PNC and opposition leader. Would be his first interview here since he became a parliamentarian and took up the position as opposition leader. Let's welcome Mr. Norton. We're waiting for Mr. Norton to come on, and once he is on, we are going to be ready to roll with the interview. In the meantime, as I ask you, please, please share the link and let everyone know that Politics 101 is on. As I said, you know, those trade unions really let us down. You know, if you're saying the government is violating the cherished right of collective bargaining, and you're using Labor Day to send that message, what are you doing going to a political breakfast? It's a political breakfast. Why are you breaking bread with a government that is trampling on the sacred rights of workers? Those are rights that workers have had to fight for centuries. And you're not doing anything drastic to send a message to government. And on Labor Day of all days, the president calls you to breakfast and you go there and sit. You know, look, that breakfast only Gahu and Nasi, the PPP unions should have been there. What are the other unions doing there? You know, I guess the guy in the labor union leadership, which is now, you know, a PPP union or PPP leadership, a union led by people who are partial to the PPP. What are the others doing there? What is PSU doing there? I think Mr. Norton, we're getting some feedback
Yes,
there. Yeah. Yeah, welcome to
and I told
Politics
you I'm
101,
traveling,
Mr. Norton.
I'm traveling.
Yeah. Yeah, we
Thanks for
can
having me, and
see that.
thanks for your listening and viewing audience.
Thank you. Mr. Norton, this is the first time you're
I didn't
on
hear you.
Politics 101. This is the first time you're on Politics 101 since you were returned to Parliament and became the opposition leader. I want, on behalf of Politics 101, to congratulate you. And want to ask you the frank question: what has changed since you've gone into Parliament, as far as the PNC and the opposition are concerned?
Well,
Did you hear my question there?
Off. I didn't hear anything at all. I just returned.
Yeah, I'm saying that this is your first appearance on Politics 101 since you returned to Parliament and became the opposition leader. And I want, on behalf of Politics 101, to congratulate you and to ask the first big question: what has changed, if anything, for as far as the opposition is concerned, beyond the fact that the leader of the party is now the leader of the opposition? What qualitatively has changed?
David, you went out and I wasn't able to hear anything.
All right, are you hearing me now?
I'm hearing you now.
Yes, I'm congratulating you on behalf of Politics 101 on your return to Parliament and assumption of the office of Leader of the Opposition. And I am asking you on behalf of the audience, what has qualitatively changed for the opposition since you have returned to Parliament and assumed the position of opposition leader? What has changed for the PNC? What has changed for the opposition?
Well, first of all, I think in our first parliamentary session, in comparison to what happened before, we were able to point out to the Speaker that we had expected a more impartial approach in the National Assembly. For the first time, we saw him actually overruling Ms. Gail Teixeira, who attempted to raise a point of order when it didn't qualify for a point of order. And then when she actually did it as a point of information, we were clear in our heads that procedurally, once it's a point of information, then it is at the discretion of the Speaker. The parliamentarian speaking at the time was MP Figueira, who continued to speak. We also think that we were able to structure our debate a little more and to be able to deal directly with the issues. I think one of the things that happened before that we have to work constantly on is sometimes we are carried away by the PPP attacking us and we attacking them. And we're not focusing on the moot to be debated. I think in the last assembly, we were able to focus on the moot, particularly on the motion on the Public Accounts Committee, and we have seen some more respect for the opposition. I think we will have to continue to work to ensure that we are more structured and that the PPP doesn't take us for granted. But I think it was only one session that we have had. And so to really do an assessment is really difficult, except for the things that actually happened in the assembly. But I think we are off to a good start. Our MPs, they have always been enthusiastic, but they are more enthusiastic. We will now seek to bring some more organization to our work and ensure that we achieve our objectives as members of Parliament.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Norton. You know, being the opposition in a winner-take-all majoritarian system is really not the most pleasant job as far as getting things done directly in your name for your constituents. Given that major limitation, how is it you intend to make the National Assembly a place of real struggle for representation and for justice for your supporters and Guyana in general in the face of such limitations?
First of all, one has to understand the functions of the opposition. The opposition has to have at its disposal a plethora of information that allow them to expose the government. At the same time, it has to engage the media, both social media and the traditional media, keeping them informed, bringing pressure to bear, and exposing the People's Progressive Party. In this regard, I think we have to increase the amount of motions that deal with the direct issues affecting our people. What that will do is allow a situation where the people are seeing what is happening, they're seeing where you're representing them. We also have to use the sectoral committees, the social and economic, foreign affairs, etc., to bring these issues to the fore. It's always difficult in a majoritarian type democratic society to do that, but it has to be done. And so we will focus on that. We will also have to use things like picket to bring to the attention of the people what is happening. This morning, for instance, we had a powerful picketing exercise involving parliamentarians and members of the APNU AFC, in which we were highlighting the fact that the People's Progressive Party is using the police force against its opponents, that it is trumping up charges, it is harassing people, and it is seeking to instill fear in people. Now, the parliamentary struggle cannot be in isolation from the wider political struggle, and so we need both. Now, at the political level, what I think the PPP is doing, particularly Jagdeo, he is seeking to exacerbate the situation, and with the hope that you will go to street protests. My understanding is that they have already prepared under their tug, Kwame Mukai. They have already prepared a number of young people that they intend to pay money, who will, once you start to go to street protests, put people into the protests to attack the Indo-Guyanese community and to be able to blame the APNU AFC for those attacks. We are getting the intelligence information, we are handling it, and we are going to develop strategies to achieve our objectives that do not allow Jagdeo to exploit it and use it for his normal ends of promoting tension between the ethnic groups. So our political action will be sensible and strategic. This morning's picketing exercise was one of them. Next week, we will take them on again, because we are not going to allow them to harass Jordan. As the people who are protesting pointed out, that what the police is being done is that the police is being used to harass innocent people, while at the same time protecting the criminal enterprise that the PPP is. So there are going to be a number of things that we are going to do, including informing the international community. I am just from Firish, where we met with all our supporters in the Firish Gibraltar area, and we have sensitized them to a number of issues: NIS, the political situation, the strategy of the PPP. We will continue these outreaches. One of the things we have to do, and we have been doing, is educating our members to lift the level of activism. People are active when they understand and support the cause and buy into the cause, and we are ensuring we're doing that. Tomorrow we head out into the Berbice River, where we will meet our members and supporters, agitate with them. We will meet Kwakwani, Aichuni. We are doing the political work on the ground. The reality is, as you would know, having been a political activist and continue to be a political activist, you don't just act in isolation from your people. You have to educate them, work with them, be with them, get the buy-in from them, and then you will bring political pressure to bear. It is evident to me that the political pressure is building up. Jagdo is behaving like a fowl without head, just cut off, while making outlandish statements. We have begun to point out to people that the greatest failure as a leader and the leader that wasted the most taxpayers' money is Jack Dale. Skeldon Factory, a waste of taxpayers' money. Fiber optic cable, a waste of taxpayers' money. Amalia Falls, a waste of taxpayers' money. He put taxpayers' money in the Berbice River Bridge and give it away to his friends and cronies. So this is not a man who in fact, a failed leader presenting himself as if he is some useful God to Guyana. There is absolutely no vision coming from him. They have a hodgepodge of projects that they are fighting with. And most of the projects are infrastructural in nature, which you know is done that way because it allows them to be involved in corruption and accumulate wealth. But when one is looking for a comprehensive program to empower people, you're seeing none. We put on the table the need for poor people who can't afford it to remove income tax from them so that they would have a higher real income in this period of high inflation. Jagdo says that can't work. Well, it could, because it is under $25 billion and we have the resources to do that. We've put on the table the need for there to be a minimum livable income rather than just speaking about the minimum wage. Because if you're an oil producing country and you have the resources, then you should be giving your people a better life. But what did Jack Dale do? He went to BAT and said to them that there is not enough revenue to do that. Today's press conference, if you look at it, we tabulated the income that is coming from oil and gas, and we made it clear to the people that, look, there is adequate income there. The problem is the biggest stumbling block to the development of Guyana, the biggest stumbling block to the people getting the resources they want is Jack Deo and the PPP. And so we are placing the issues squarely in the public domain so that we can push the PPP on their back foot. Now, having exposed the lies about NIS, you would have seen that the sugar workers themselves took them on. Their lies are catching up with them. And we are going to expose their lies. We are going to expose the corruption, and we will advocate alternative approaches that will benefit the people of Guyana. For instance, we reminded them today that we propose that in dealing with gas to shore, let us do the feasibility and let us move in the direction of ISO containerized gas, which will remove the need for a pipeline and which will allow our fisher folks who are in trouble now to be able to continue to fish while at the same time we get gas to service the people of Guyana. It is fairly well established now by research that has been done that even going in the direction of solar is more economic than gas to shore. But what makes gas to shore attractive to the People's Progressive Party is the amount of money they can divert to corrupt practices. And so they are not interested in the people's well-being. They are interested in being able to accumulate wealth illegally at the expense of the people by going to projects that are not financially viable but create conditions propitious to them being enriched through corruption. And so I think all of these issues are coming together and placing the People's Progressive Party on their back foot, if they have
let's
one.
let's let's Mr. Norton. I want to get your take on two things. First of all, I want to ask you whether in your meetings with your colleagues in Parliament that you are in the process of putting together what I would refer to as a parliamentary agenda. We talked about how to use the committees and so on. But I would like to know if you have a parliamentary agenda or you're working on one, and what would that or could that look like?
We are working on a parliamentary agenda. It will demand a lot of consultation between the APNU and the AFC. We have ideas for a parliamentary agenda. In one of my presentations, we outlined we intend to use the sectorial committees more. We intend to use motions more. We intend to use questions more. If you saw what happened when Ganesh Maipal questioned Dharamlal, he was at sea. And so the world saw that here is an incompetent person pomposetting as a minister when he doesn't know the law and was trying to hide behind some advice from the Attorney General, while the Attorney General himself was hiding and not coming to his rescue. So we need a parliamentary agenda, but also we went to the Parliamentary Management Committee meeting and there wasn't a quorum. Now, we will have to push to ensure that committee functions, because that committee will be critical to developing the wider parliamentary agenda. But we will develop a parliamentary agenda not restricted to motions, but also we'll have to go in the direction of proposing our own bills, because there are a number of issues that the government isn't tackling that needs to be tackled at the level of the parliament.
Would you care to give us a couple of those issues that are likely to find their way into that agenda?
One of the issues I think that will have to find its way on that agenda is amendment to the Procurement Act to ensure that ordinary people, that small businesses can have access and be able to benefit from our wealth. As presently structured, it is in a way that only the big businesses and those linked to the PPP can benefit. So that will have to be one element. I also believe that we will have to move in the direction of producing a parliamentary agenda that links the gas and oil and gas resources to improving the NIS. One of the most significant developments in the history of Guyana is the establishment of the NIS. And as the PPP seeks to destroy it and do bad investment, we will have to move in the direction of legislation to protect the NIS and to promote proper investment so that the NIS becomes a viable long-term project that will serve the people of Guyana and stop being a cash cow for the People's Progressive Party. Those are two areas. But I also believe that we need to move in the direction of proper legislation vis-a-vis the youth. One of the mistakes we make is that we begin to treat the youth from say 14, 18 years of age. But by that time, the social ills have already stepped in. I am of the view that we need to take to Parliament either a bill or a motion calling on the government to begin to look into early childhood education so that children from birth to about 3-4 years of age, before they go into the nursery school system, are prepared for the school system and are prepared in a way that allow them to become contributors to the development of the society rather than negative actors in the society. In this regard, one will have to look at a reviewed role of the Guyana Police Force. If a young man arrives at a station in Guyana now, the first thing the police says is take off your belt and go in the lockup. There is no, look, our police force was trained to enforce law. The amount of social problems that have been created since the PPP in power, we need a social work element in the Guyana Police Force to deal with the social ills that are emerging, apart from the fact that there is need for comprehensive government programs. So there are many issues to be placed on the parliamentary agenda. It's a question of us prioritizing and deciding what is most important at this stage and pursuing it. But there are a whole plethora of issues to be dealt with.
What about electoral reform, which is going to certainly be on the PPP's agenda? Do you plan to put some emphasis on electoral reform?
We set up in the PNCR a committee that has reported to us on electoral reform, and there are a number of issues that have emerged that we have to address. So electoral reform will be one. For instance, they are talking about electoral reform, and there was no assessment of what went wrong at the Ghana Elections Commission in the last election. So Jagger and company superficially decide they can charge this person, charge that person without a post-mortem on the process. And again, it shows you their incompetence. Then if one looks at it, they want to break up Region 4. But then Region 6, 2, 3, 5, their strongholds have the same problems, but they don't intend to address it. We have got to push them in the direction of a comprehensive approach. I believe in the electoral reform that we must
we seem to be. Go ahead.
Because chairman, when you have a chairman that is going in with one side all the time, it removes even the perception that she is independent. What we need is a kind of a Suraj Bali approach in which he allowed the political parties to resolve the issues and then come, rather than he voting and coming down on one side or the other. I think we need to credit Suraj Bali with bringing a certain level of professionalism to the Elections Commission, which has been eroded by the present chairman by her voting as if she's a member of the People's Progressive Party. So as we talk electoral reform and we talk about reform about GCOM, we have to remove this casting vote from the chairwoman, because she seems to be inclined to go with the PPP wherever they're going. And so you will not get an independent commission in that fashion. Those are just like two areas I think we need to address, but they have to be addressed. That's the reality.
Mr. Norton, if we can go back to the area of street protests, because you did introduce it early in our conversation. But as you know, that is a very controversial area of political activity in Guyana. You've been getting no shortage of advice from people who are sympathetic to the government. And the advice from all of them seem to be telling you, don't go on the streets. On the other hand, you've been getting a lot of advice from your own supporters who are calling on you to go to the streets and demonstrate your protest against what's happening. In those circumstances, how do you balance your responsibility to ensure order, but also to carry out the constitutional right of citizens to protest if they feel that things are not being done correctly by the government?
I'll say this. I am responsive to the concern that street protests can be used by the PPP to attack Indians and then blame it on us. I am also convinced that the PPP doesn't respond if there isn't political pressure. We have to come up with new forms of street protests to achieve our objectives. Now, I don't want to get into details, but I believe with time you will see it manifest. Now, I've listened to all the issues being raised. I will not be boxed in a corner. I will, with the leadership of the AP and UAFC, think through our approaches and come up with novel ways to protest in the streets of Guyana without giving the PPP the opportunity to infiltrate it and claim the AP and UAFC. We also have got to recognize that the aim is to bring the PPP and JAGDEO to book, not to allow it to be used to achieve their objectives. And so as we look at our strategic objectives, we will find novel ways of ensuring we can achieve our objective. And you'll see some of them manifest with time.
Mr. Norton, you took part in if we may shift gears a little, you took part in the May Day events. You were out there, you spoke at the GTUC event. I think that this year's events have brought into stark reality really the role of the trade unions in a change in Guyana. Are you satisfied that the trade unions are being allowed the space that they need to function and to represent their workers?
Once you have an authoritarian dictatorial regime, the trade unions will never be given the space. The People's Progressive Party is not a party that is disposed to the workers being represented by trade unions. The fact that GAU members rebelled and virtually made that Carville Duncan into a target suggests that they recognize now that the government is lying to them and they need genuine representation. I believe there is a place for genuine representation by the trade union. And we have got to work with the trade union movement. And I say work with, not control. We have got to work with the trade union movement for them to occupy the space they need to occupy to ensure that this government is accountable and transparent. And that is the real task before us. The government is happy with the divided trade union movement. Let us recall, when we were in government, they were willing to march with the TUC because it suited them. The minute they are back in government, they don't want it. They wanted 2 rallies. And then you have President Ali farcically inviting trade union leaders on the morning of May Day to have breakfast. Isn't that ridiculous? This is the day of the workers. When the workers' leadership have got to organize their marches, etc. That is the morning you chose to invite them for breakfast. You were probably signaling to them that little free food is more important than them representing the workers. I am glad that a lot of the workers' unions rejected it, saying to them, we are disposed to dialogue, but you can't disrespect us and ask us on the morning of May Day to come to have breakfast with you, while some of our members might not even be having a bottle of water, much less your sophisticated breakfast that is paid for by the taxpayers' money, when a large section of the society can't afford to break any fast whatsoever. That is the bottom line.
Yeah, Mr. Norton, successive governments including the coalition government, um, did not have not recognized the right to collective bargaining. It has been a sore point in Guyana across the region. If you were to be at the head of a government, would you correct that terrible wrong that is being done to workers and their representatives?
Yes, I do believe where trade unions have the right to bargain and there is a proper system for relating to them and understanding their concerns and working with them to arrive at packages that are useful, then there is a place for the trade union. If one looks at banks DIH, we see they have trade unions, there is collective bargaining, and there is stability. If one look at what Sol just recently did in terms of raising wages and salaries and benefits through collective bargaining, then one
We seem to be having some technical difficulties.
I
Yes,
was
right.
saying, I
Yes,
was saying, if you saw what happened with banks, and then you
yes.
see what Sol did in terms of improving the lives of the people, you will see that there's a positive role for collective bargaining. And as president of a government that I am leading, collective bargaining will be placed high on the agenda. I know for a fact that there are difficulties with collective bargaining, but I think the difficulties could be surmounted and the positives that will come out of collective bargaining will contribute significantly to the development of not of the people of Guyana generally. So the answer to that is yes. I think it is teamed with potential for ensuring stability and good relationship between the labor movement and any government.
The president has signaled its intention to meet with you to deal with constitutional matters, which it has refused to deal with since coming to power 2 years ago, under the flimsy excuse that the opposition must first recognize the government. They seem to have thrown that aside, and they have signaled that they are willing to meet with you. You were quoted in the press yesterday, I think, Stab News, saying that you have not gotten that call yet. But in a sense, you have telegraphed the call by saying that when you meet, you just don't want a narrow meeting to deal with appointing constitutional bodies, but also dealing with larger governance issues. What is the thinking behind that broadened agenda for the encounter with the president?
What is what? I didn't hear that. What is?
What is the rationale? What is the thinking behind your decision
Okay.
to broaden the encounter?
Okay. First of all, I accept that the opposition leader has a constitutional responsibility to deal with those elements of the constitution in which power devolves on the opposition leader to be involved in meaningful consultation. And so it is my intention to honor that obligation. Now, the obligation of the opposition leader is to represent, in the first case, the people that support. And so I am obligated to do the consultation. Now, one of the areas that I heard Jack Dio mention was this question of the Chief Justice and the Chancellor. Now, I believe we should appoint the Chief Justice and the Chancellor. But the mere appointment of them will not deal with the issues of democracy and governance. And the real rationale for my position is that for us to solve the problems we are talking about, it doesn't only have to address those constitutional matters, it has to address the governance issues. oil producing countries that are not practicing good governance end up in a state of affairs in which the people don't benefit and the elite and the rich make the money. And so I'm saying,
we seem to have lost the audio there. We seem to have lost the audio with Mr. Norton. We seem to have lost the audio. He's speaking, but we are not hearing him. Mr. Operator, can you signal to Mr. Norton that we have lost the audio? We seem to have lost the audio with Mr. Norton. We are trying to get back the audio. We're not hearing. We're not hearing. While they're trying to work that out, in case you're just joining us, we are doing the interview this evening with Mr. Aubrey Norton. It's an interview that was scheduled to be done last week, Thursday, and we couldn't do it because Mr. Norton was traveling, as he is now. He's traveling, as you notice, as he's doing this interview. And we have time to engage him on a number of other questions which I badly needs his input on. So while they are...
Doc, he has to unmute his mic, please.
Please unmute. Can you
okay,
call him?
You hearing me now?
Yes, I'm hearing you now.
Okay, I was saying to you when we lost connection that as leader of the opposition, I have to represent the people of Guyana on all the issues that are critical to us and our development. And I was saying governance issues are important. If you have a situation where police are trumping up charges against people, if you have a situation, we just had a case where a minister family is linked to drugs. And you know what was said? They need medical and a medical assessment of the psychiatric aspect of the person. Never in the history of this country, when somebody is charged for drugs, it is suggested that they're mad. And so what one sees is the law serving the elite and the upper class. And when it comes to the ordinary man, prison. And so we have to deal with the critical governance issues. And as a representative of the people, I will have to deal with all the issues affecting our people. How can I speak to the president about the Chief Justice, etc., but not speak to him on the fact that we have all these oil resources and they are not meeting the people of Guyana? How do I speak to the president about constitutional issues and don't speak to him about the discrimination that is occurring? I am just from Firish, where I was told by the people that equipment was put there to put a water well so that the people of Firish can get water. The people of Irish identify the land for it. And what the government is seeking to do is to move it from Irish to a community that is their support base and to deprive the people of Irish of water. How can I, Aubrey Norton, as leader of the opposition, as one who's expected to represent the people of Irish, speak to the president on matters that are important, but other important matters such as the discrimination against the people of Irish, the discrimination against the people of Mukka, the discrimination against the people of Linden.
We seem to have lost the audio again. We seem to have lost the audio.
Combat leader, your mic, combat leader. You got to tap on the mic button. Thank you.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, we're in,
I think the mic is automatically muting itself. I don't know why.
All right, keep an eye on it. Keep an eye on it.
But don't forget, you said you want me for half hour.
We have not scratched the surface, but we'll try to get in as much as we can. Let me ask your
You should be hearing me again.
Yes, I'm hearing you now. There is a recent poll that was released by the International Republican Institute that has been making the rounds. Some really shocking findings of that opinion poll. Have you had a chance to go through the poll?
Yes, I have.
And what are some of your general observations?
The most general observation is that people believe that the People's Progressive Party is I was saying, people believe, the polls suggest that people believe that the government is extremely corrupt. They believe that they are incompetent. They believe that they are not serving the interests of the people of Guyana. And what the poll signals is that people are looking in the direction of change. That is the bottom line of the poll.
Yes, but let me say that the poll also suggests that people have lost faith not just in the government of the day, they've lost faith in the system, period. And most young people don't think they have a future in Guyana. People don't have any confidence in the electoral system. Even East Indians, only 28% of them feel that the results that were announced reflect the will of the people. What, as you as opposition leaders, the leader of the PNC, how do you plan to restore general popular confidence in government and the institutions?
We have to adumbrate alternative, new transformational programs and indicate from now our willingness to live by our word, by doing the things we promise to do. I believe as we engage young people, and we're engaging a lot of them, we are going to outline a vision which they can buy into, because we will consult them on it. And as we outline that vision, it is going to be a vision that will take Guyana forward, and people will be able to recognize that it will take Guyana forward. For instance, we have been advocating development that is people-centered, that it should focus on the development of people. Among it, we said removal of income tax from poor people. I think a lot of young people are buying into that. They are also buying into a minimum livable income, which is needed. But we need to do more in terms of young people. We have developed a youth policy, which the government seemed to have abandoned, but that policy had put young people at the center. We need to engage young people to put them in business. We need to engage young people to release their cultural talents. One area that the present government is paying no attention to. So I am of the view that we will reinvigorate these young people by developing policies and programs that will unleash their talents, their skills, and allow them to initiate. And I believe by doing that, we will be in a position to remobilize our young people behind a proper national development plan, strategy and plan.
The poll also showed that people have almost zero confidence in political parties, and that would include your political party, my political party, all the political parties. How do you intend, as the leader of one of the two major political parties, how do you intend to invigorate confidence, first of all, among your supporters, and then among the populace at large. It seems to me, if I may quote a Jelly Jagan, the political parties are on trial.
All right. Let me say I just came from Firish.
Mm-hmm.
I was in Mocha. I have been in Linden. I'm scheduled to go to a number of communities on the West Coast and the Essequibo. And every time I go, it is one thing people say to me. They are glad with this new approach in which we are meeting out to people and staying in contact with them. And I think that is what Guyanese want. And there's a distinct difference between what we do and what the PPP does. We go out there, we engage them, we listen to them. The people of Firish told me that Mark Phillips went there and he was very dismissive of them. So they didn't want to hear him. You saw Jack Deo in a purported consultation virtually shouted and tell Edgy, little boy, shut up. Now, that is not the approach. The approach is one in which you engage the communities, listen to them, learn from them, and then give them leadership as to the direction we should go. I believe our approach is a superior approach, it's a better approach, and that approach will result in the re-engaging of people and the emergence of a new confidence in the political movement called the APNU-AFC, of which the PNCR is a part.
Mr. Norton, there's a question there on the screen from the audience, and this audience has been, as you would imagine, quite schooled on the policy of cash transfers, and they will get you without asking you about your party position on cash transfer. Your predecessor waffled on it. What is your party's position on this question of cash transfer proposed by the WPA and Professor Clive Thomas?
Look, the proposals I'm making suggest that I believe in cash transfer. Do you agree that if we remove income tax, we automatically transfer cash to ordinary people?
Yes, sir.
Good. So that is evidence that I believe in cash transfer. Do you agree that if I propose, like we did, a minimum livable income, what that means is we will do an assessment of people's needs and then set their income at the lowest level of what they need to live. That will transfer cash to them. We talk about supporting and promoting micro and small businesses. That will transfer cash. While I believe, I do not believe that we should just give parents money. I believe in a cash transfer system in which parents can earn money by ensuring that their children are in school and they are supporting them. So there will be cash transfer to parents, but not just every parent, because if a parent isn't sending his or her child to school or allowing the child not to go to school, why are you giving that parent a transfer for education? Our cash transfer must be targeted to ensure that it achieves the objective that it sets out to achieve. For instance, whatever people thought about David Granger, I think the idea of buses, etc., was a good idea, and we can transfer resources into these areas to ensure children can go to school. I believe with the level of poverty, children should be given meals at school. That also is a cash transfer. So I agree generally with the WPA, but we might differ or need to negotiate the specificities.
Have you met with Dr. Thomas and the WPA on this particular issue of cash transfer?
No, not as yet. You know, we are working, and I've been very busy on. Well, there's some kind of agreement that the WPA will return, but we have some things to tidy up, and then I think we will meet on not only cash transfer, but any area in which the WPA has expertise and are willing to lend. You know, I'm one who believes that a lot of people say to me, why worry with the WPA? They don't have numbers. Well, I hold a different view. All political parties can contribute different things to the process. I believe the WPA can bring intellectual and other capacities to the APNU that we need, and I will pursue that.
While we're on that question, have there been structured meetings with the AFC as part of the AFC coalition in opposition? For all intents and purposes, you are saddled with being together in the opposition because that's how you fought the elections. Have you been having structured meetings
Yes,
to coordinate your work?
Yes, and we have agreed that at least once a month we should meet. And at the last meeting, I think we also agreed that one time we can meet at the AFC, another time we can meet at our headquarters. So we are beginning to build the mechanisms.
Mr. Norton, when you came to office as leader of the PNC, you promised that one of the things that you would work assiduously on is healing the fractures in the party. Fractures in parties are normal, especially when parties lose office. And you did promise that that would be a number one issue for you in terms of moving forward. How successful have you been in that endeavor?
Many persons who weren't elected to the executive were co-opted to the executive and now work with the executive. Like you said, look, we must live in the real world. Everybody take defeat differently. Some people take defeat as part of a competitive process and move on. Some people take defeat as a means to just oppose and be disruptive. Fortunately for us, the largest section of people took defeat as a result of the competition and willing to move on. But there will always be those who see defeat as a means to carry a fight and destroy everything because you are not in charge. There is that little group. I think the people in the party will take care of that. But what I'm saying to you is that as a party and as leader of the party, I meet out to all those, including those who oppose me, and many of them are functioning in the party, and it will take some time to heal. Even a wound that is physical takes time, much less social scars. So I am satisfied that initiatives have been taken and that people who opposed me are in the fray. I, however, had to deal with situations where people were, at least one person was being disingenuous and not saying to the world what the reality was. And so I said it, and we're about to move on.
You know, let me ask you this intellectual question, Mr. Norton, and that is that my observation and study of Guyanese party politics is that since the death of the founder leaders of the PNC and the PNC, it has been difficult for other leaders to function as maximum leader. You had Hamilton Green challenging White, you had Vincent Alexander challenging Granger, you have yourself and others challenging Mr. Granger and so forth. And you were bold enough to say that you think the age of the maximum leader is over. And I'm proposing that it has been over since Barnum died. How are you navigating the fact that you are not a maximum leader, but you have to provide bold leadership to hold the party together? How are you balancing that?
First of all, you have to sell your ideas to people and get them to buy into it. I believe in the approach of outlining. When I became leader of the party, I went to the central executive and we discussed, I think, 15 policy positions that we will take. We discussed it and we agreed. So even though someone might run out to say, I am making pronouncement on my own, these issues were discussed. All our press conferences are held within the confines of those policy decisions that we agreed on. However, there will always be people who will say, you know, it wasn't discussed. Look, the PNCR constitution provides for the party leader to act in the absence of central executive. And the fact that I consult even when there isn't central executive, take a press conference, is a team that determines what happens at press conference, not Aubrey Norton alone. So I am contributing to breaking down the barriers that are placed by maximum leadership. I do not believe in this era maximum leadership will be the best. Forbes Burnham and Jagan and company, they built those parties from the bottom and people respected them. And there were times, even when they disagreed, they were willing to go with them. I believe in the new dispensation, we have to discuss, disagree, agree, and move forward. In that process, in that democratic process, there will always be people who will seek to take advantage of it. It is at that point you need strong leadership to rally the forces and ensure we progress, and I will do just that.
Mr. Norton, you have mentioned that you've been going around the country, meeting with people, sharing the party's perspective and plans with them. What are you hearing from the people that is instructive as you plan your struggles in the coming months and the coming weeks and months?
There are different views you're hearing. There are people who say you need to be more radical. And I will have to explain to them why we need which approach when. There are people who say that they would have lost trust in political leaders, and you have to spend time explaining to them what happened and building their trust. We are doing that. There are people who want to see a quick fix. They get everything in a day. We have to talk to them about deferred gratification and a number of other issues. So we are hearing, we are listening, and we are responding based on what we would have heard and what we would have listened to. And I believe that is the approach that will cause us to succeed. But may I say to you, you are running way over our agreed time.
and on that cue, I will ask you one last question.
Thank you, sir.
There was an editorial in the Stabrook News that I had cause to speak to, because I think it was more than an editorial that deals the role of the opposition leader. I think it went into places that that strike people like myself, and I think yourself, the wrong way. That there are agendas out there that go beyond your office. Would you care to respond to that?
Well, we did respond in a press release to say to Stabrook News, we accept good criticisms, we accept constructive criticisms, but we're not going to accept you telling us how we must act. We will listen to you, we'll be responsive to your concern, but we will speak to our constituencies, get from them their position, and we are going to formulate policy strategies to achieve our objective. Stabrook News has its interests and its approach. The people we represent, many of their interests might necessarily conflict with Stabrook News. So for us, Stabrook News is a reflection of certain opinions. We try to understand public opinion and respond to public opinion, which Stabrook's interest might be a part, but Stabrook's interest in itself is not the public's interest. And it is my task to understand the various elements, to understand the nuances, to work out the vicissitudes and arrive at what are the policy positions that our people need and respond to them. And I think we are doing a fairly good job of that.
Mr. Norton, Aubrey Norton, they're leader of the PNC and leader of the opposition, traveling from Firish and the quarantine. and being gracious enough to grant us this interview. There are scores of questions here from you in the audience. I wish we could have, Mr. Norton could have responded to all of them, but as you can imagine, there are constraints. We're going to work with him to come back periodically to field questions directly from you. Mr. Norton, closing thoughts, and I would ask you to speak directly to the viewing audience here tonight and the Guyanese people in general.
Let me say thanks for having me. And let me say to Guyanese, we need to be patient and activist-oriented at the same time. We need to, first of all, expose the People's Progressive Party and Jagdeo for what they are, and we intend to propose proper policies and programs that will help us to take Guyana out of this very dismal situation we're in and to restore democracy, good governance, and the rule of law. That is what I'll say at this point, and wish you a good evening, all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aubrey Norton, leader of the PNC and leader of the opposition in the National Assembly. Tomorrow night, we are going to be taking a look at the recent State Department Human Rights Report on Guyana that focuses on corruption and police extrajudicial killings and so forth. We're going to have our usual team, Mr. G.H.K. Lal, Dr. Henry Jeffrey, and I think the third panelist he doesn't come to mind no. But tomorrow night we would be dealing with the United States State Department report, Human Rights Report. We are going to be dealing with that tomorrow night. I want to thank you all for being patient with us. Here we go. The third panelist is Adam Harris. So tune in tomorrow evening at 6:30 when we deal with the 2021 State Department Human Rights Report. Love you all as always. Keep with the struggle. Be patient, but also be persistent. Good night. See you all tomorrow night.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.